Since the dawn of anime, there have been magical girls of every character and caliber, spanning from the naive yet heroic, to the terrifying and devastating, to whatever the fuck this is. But there is a new kind of magical girl that makes me feel so seen in a whole new way. Presenting the magical girls of social anxiety. I'm your socially anxious host, Nat, and welcome to the world of Neko Deco Pop. I think we can all agree that going outside and touching grass is horrible, and interacting with the humanity beyond that can feel like a death sentence. But Nat, aren't you a musician with a 9-to-5 where you have to heavily interact with the world? Yes, and it's horrible. Performing is fun, but then I have to interact with people and network, and then at my job I have to act like I like people? I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemies. No, wait, I probably would because I'm petty like that. But the matter of the fact is, going out into the world and interacting with humanity, even if you don't have social anxiety, is the worst. So those of us who do it with social anxiety on top of that are literally superhuman. We are legend, we are legion, we are magical girls. It has brought me so much joy to see our kind being represented more and more in anime. So today I wanted to break down what being a magical girl with social anxiety looks like, and the shining pillars of our community in these truly outstanding anime. Starting in chronological order, we have Sawako, aka the godmother of social anxiety from Kimi no Toroke. Representing the mid to late 2000s shoujo gold standard, Kimi no Toroke paved the way and inspired so many of the other entries on this list. Our magical girl in question is Sawako Kuronoma, who has been dubbed Sadako by her roommates due to her, generally gloomy nature and just that whole vibe. Despite her best efforts, between her long hair, terrifying smile, and difficulty being vocal, Sawako really can resemble Sadako from the Ring series. After suffering the bulk of her life unintentionally terrifying those around her, Sawako has internalized that ostracization which has depleted her self-esteem. Then, something magical happens. She is noticed by the most popular boy in her school, who adopts her socially and invites her into his world. From there, she makes more and more friends who accept her for who she is. She slowly but surely comes out of her shell and is able to achieve the kind of social life she's always dreamed of. And not only that, she, spoiler alert, enters into a relationship which encourages her to grow even more. Kimi no Toroke is a truly wholesome and wonderful show which captures her journey and transformation, all in a well-paced show that gives heaps of early 2000s nostalgia, even if you weren't active during that era. Our next entry is Komi from Komi Can't Communicate, which is probably the most obvious addition to this list just, for the name alone, which also encapsulates the thesis of the show. Komi is a beautiful high schooler whose presence is literally so majestic that her new high school immediately crowns her as their school idol and worship her every move. The irony is that Komi's bad bitch attitude is actually a completely misunderstood social anxiety complex that literally prevents Komi from communicating verbally without having a literal panic attack. Since everyone is so taken by this constructed persona, no one thinks twice about her lack of verbal communication. It isn't until her new deskmate Tadano accurately reads her and recognizes her actual persona. From here, he is able to make the connection and she responds in turn, kickstarting the long and arduous process of her coming out of her shell. I really love this anime because 1, it's hilarious, 2, it's absolutely heartfelt, and 3, it has probably the most unhinged set of side characters that truly set this anime apart from its counterparts. Watching Komi's journey is truly awe-inspiring and just so wonderful. You cheer her on at every step and every victory she achieves in her journey to overcome her anxieties. Bocchi the Rock was the sleeper hit of 2022. Where Denji was our himbo hero in Chainsaw Man, Bocchi was our socially anxious hero in Bocchi the Rock. Although both are Disney princesses, Bocchi definitely takes the cake for her mental strength and fortitude. The story follows her journey as she embarks in her high school career. After spending her middle school days learning guitar tirelessly and growing a following on her YouTube channel, even, without showing her face, she has now finally entered high school. Emboldened by her years of study and confidence building, she attempts to transform that musical confidence into social confidence and works to build friends and maybe even a band to help her feel like she belongs. This process pretty quickly fails, but before she can fully fall into a pit of despair, she is discovered on her way home one day with fellow musicians who invite her into their band. From here, she starts her journey as a musician, and with the help of her extrovert bandmates, she's able to start putting herself out there in a way she's always dreamed of. I personally loved this anime so much because I have never seen such an accurate representation of the music industry. They don't romanticize it. They show the cruel and frustrating realities of it. There's even a scene where they have a big performance where they've spent weeks rehearsing, selling tickets, and putting themselves out there in ways that push each one of them to the brink. And then on the day of the show, it's completely rained out by a typhoon, which results in only 12 people attending the show. And not just 12 people for their set, only 12 people for all of the bands combined. I have never felt so represented by an anime because I have played a multitude of those shows. In the year of 2022, where we had some of the best anime of the decade, Bocchi the Rock not only held its own, it became an overnight success to the point where even the author was surprised and slightly horrified. I cried after the last episode because I was so moved. So to wrap up the backgrounds on these anime and introduce our magical girls, let's talk about the main reason why we're here. Why are they magical girls? It's not like this is an isekai where they have magical powers. These are all slice-of-life anime and they're just all normal teenagers. The main connecting factor of all magical girls is that they transform and take on a new persona. Despite that, you may have also noticed that although our magical girls of social anxiety do transform, they mostly do because they were adopted by an extrovert who helped bring them out of the shadows. So by that logic, wouldn't the credit go to their extrovert and not to them? Although we can't overlook their extroverts' help and the work that they put in to help our magical girls transform, this transformation would not be possible without the internal work of our magical girl in question. If we go back to the OG magical girls from Sailor Moon, you'll notice that they weren't completely self-sufficient either. Sailor Moon had Luna, who helps her with the initial transformation, and then Tuxedo Mask, who literally doesn't do anything other than throwing a rose and saying some affirming words, but still helps remind Sailor Moon of her power and ability to persevere. The Sailor Scouts also rely on each other to help support when they fail. Even Sailor Venus, who appears the most confident and competent, is awoken by Artemis, and then has a literal team behind her when she reaches the level of idol celebrity. The moral of the story is, even the Sailor Scouts, who have magical cats and each other to help mold them into the leaders they become, all have to first turn inwards and muster that internal strength it takes to awaken their own powers. So do our magical girls of social anxiety have magical powers? Well, on a literal magic power level, no. But isn't overcoming debilitating anxiety a superpower in itself?
Absolutely.
Sawako chooses to continue attempting to reach out to her peers despite constant rejection. Many of her classmates who don't suffer from social anxiety maybe have like a sliver of the mental strength and fortitude it takes to receive daily rejection but still persevere. Sawako does get lucky by being noticed and adopted by Kazahaya, who brings her into his social circle, but even if that didn't happen, Sawako would have continued to reach out and would have eventually met other like-minded individuals who accepted her. Her incredible determination and ability to move forward despite setbacks would have led her to eventual acceptance by the outside world. And in the meantime, she has a great support system of family who accept her no matter where she is at her journey. They don't shame her for her anxieties and instead celebrate her wins, despite what they mean to her father in terms of, romantic relationships and how that would eventually lead Sawako away from him. But, that's a whole, father-daughter toxic dynamic thing. We didn't need to get into that in this video. Sawako's friendship with Kazahaya turns into a relationship, which requires a superhuman level of initiation on both sides. Sawako overcomes the possibility of the biggest rejection of her life so far, and moves forward with engaging and pursuing her feelings. Through the process, she learns that even someone as popular and socially fluent as Kazahaya is, he also faces that same level of anxiety when it comes to pursuing a relationship. Through her strength, she encourages him to also summon internal strength to move forward, and they begin a relationship together. It is already terrifying enough to start a relationship despite age or experience. So imagine how much more terrifying it is to do as a teenager with hormones exacerbating fears and then having social anxiety on top of that. Sawako has superhuman internal strength, which she chooses to summon and magically transforms herself into the person she's always wanted to be. Komi chooses to let Tadano in. She could have gone on without communicating with others for her entire school career. She managed fine all the way through elementary and middle school, but she summons her strength to accept that connection with Tadano, which leads to their first chalkboard communication. She could have just run away from that interaction or decided after that interaction that she didn't want to continue and just shut Tadano out. But she braves through debilitating social anxiety and near constant social interaction-induced panic attacks to move forward in her own journey. She chooses to pick up that notebook to help her communicate. She chooses to keep trying despite whatever setbacks she might encounter. And, Tadano's help, of course, should be recognized, but with Komi's beauty and experience, even without him, she would have eventually learned how to interact with the outside world. And even if, worst case scenario, she never overcame those obstacles, she could have still lived a very fulfilling life. Look at her father, for example. Even as a middle-aged man, he struggles communicating verbally and easily gets flustered. But even so, he lives a very fulfilling life and was able to maintain a stable job and have a family of his own. That's one of the elements that I loved about Komi Can't Communicate, which also sets it apart from the others on this list, because it shows that you can live a happy, full life and be accepted even if you don't overcome your anxieties. That level of acceptance of one's anxieties is incredibly comforting because, yes, if you are able to overcome and work through your anxieties, that is a wonderful thing. But it's not the end of the world if you don't, as long as you have a support system. You can move at your own pace and awaken your own magical powers on your timeline. Throughout her middle school experience, Bocchi attempted to reach out despite rejection. She could have completely internalized this rejection and turned to living life as a shut-in. But she decides to follow the joy and inspiration felt by seeing that band on TV and learns a whole instrument. She then not only continues to better herself musically, but puts her out there completely by creating a YouTube channel and uploading regularly. As someone who has been in music the bulk of their life, I can tell you just how terrifying it is to put yourself out there musically on social media. You are opening yourself up to some of the most vile criticism known to man, and making yourself vulnerable in a way that is permanent because the internet never forgets. Bocchi then takes the massive step of bringing her instrument to school in hopes to use it as a bridge of communication to her classmates. And although it doesn't work with her classmates, it works when she's out in the real world, and that's where she's discovered by her future bandmates. Joining a band and putting your skills out into the world for criticism is its own kind of hell, because you're putting your self-esteem as a musician on display, and even if you're amazing by yourself, you could be complete garbage to others or learn about weaknesses that could send you spiraling. Then, Bocchi embarks on the most terrifying you can do as someone with social anxiety. She performs on stage. Performing on stage for others requires a superhuman strength that is nearly impossible to articulate. And every performance is different. You could have an amazing performance where you played everything correctly, but your anxiety was so bad that you had a near constant panic attack. You could have technical issues that make it sound like you don't know what you're doing, which completely hacks away at your self-esteem. You could have an amazing performance, but then when you watch the videos of it, you realize that you messed up multiple things. You could perform with bandmates who then resent you afterwards after messing up the flow of the group. You could perform where your reputation as an artist could lead to opportunities or being blacklisted. You could perform where everything went wonderfully and you feel like a superhuman afterwards. And you could perform for years and have your confidence completely shattered by a single performance. I know all of these scenarios because I have experienced every single one multiple times over the decade I have been in music. Bocchi performs superhuman feats by getting on that stage every time she performs. No matter the help from her bandmates or support from her family, it all comes down to the strength to persevere despite any and all past, present, and future setbacks. I have never felt more represented or prouder of a character. Magical girls don't need literal magic to transform. They need internal strength that awakens their own power. And at the end of the day, it's this internal strength that transforms them into magical girls. That is why Sawako, Komi, and Bocchi all fit the bill of being magical girls. Although they aren't slaying bad guys like in Sailor Moon or dealing with whatever fresh horrors occur in Puella Magi Madoka Magica, they face daily battles within themselves. Like the Sailor Scouts, sometimes they win their battles, but sometimes they lose horribly, and those setbacks have absolutely devastating consequences. But like our favorite magical girls from childhood, they pick themselves back up to live and fight another day. They fight battle after battle, not necessarily on the same universal scale, but within themselves. They fight to better their life. They fight to better their future. They fight to make their younger selves proud. When you have anxiety, every day can be like a struggle. Every day could contain uncertain horrors that make you feel like it's the actual end of the world. Every day presents battles that, enduring on a regular basis, leads to fatigue, unbelievable exhaustion, and even depression. Living with anxiety requires ungodly strength and skills, and overcoming said anxieties, even if it's only for a moment, requires superhuman internal power. Magical girls are a beautiful concept that we can all aspire to be, despite gender or identity. Sawako, Komi, and Bocchi are magical girls because they transform that inescapable fear into something beautiful and powerful. Even if we maybe don't feel like we have that same level of strength to transform ourselves, it is so comforting to see ourselves being represented by these three. Even if we have setbacks in our own journeys, how wonderful is it to see hope personified by these magical girls of social anxiety?